Welcome to episode 10 of the UFC podcast. My guest today is one of the best MMA fighters out of Canada, Mandel Nallo. Welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
I'm doing well, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Just getting finished up with a pretty busy holiday season. Um,
Yeah.
how were the holidays for yourself, man?
Yeah, they're fun. Holidays are always better. I got two kids now, so holidays are always fun when you have, you know, little kids running around. Makes it a little more special.
How old are your kids?
3 and 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's we're full on.
Yep. Are you doing the whole Santa thing with them?
Uh like halfway. I basically don't want to be the one guy who's ruining it for all the other kids. So we're like, I'm not that committed to it. I'm not that committed to the bit. We're not leaving milk and cookies out and stuff.
Yep. Hey, man, I was that kid in first grade that told everybody that Santa wasn't real. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you at least having your kids back on that.
I'm sure it reflects well on you.
Yeah.
Your parents must have got a lot of trouble. What's
Yeah.
up, buddy? Yeah. I'll come back in 1 second.
No worries, man.
1 second.
Yeah.
Your mom can do it? Okay.
Duty calls,
Sorry.
brother. I understand.
Yeah, exactly.
um, so where are you guys located at in Canada now?
Toronto. I'm with my family here, just like in Greektown in Toronto.
Okay. Never made it to that part of the country. I've spent quite a bit of time in BC and Alberta, but
Oh, okay.
I'm originally from Montana, so those are the much easier drives up for me
Oh
to
yeah,
get to
okay.
get to that
That's
part of Canada.
Eastern Canada is a bit of a hike for you. Yeah,
Yep.
okay, cool. You live
Um,
in a great place. I grew up in BC, so
okay. Yeah, I saw that. It was kind of near Vancouver, is that correct?
yeah,
And how long did you grow up there?
the first uh 10 years of my life.
Okay, and then your family moved out east with you?
And then we moved to West Africa for
Oh,
four
wow.
years. And then we moved to the East Coast, yeah.
Speak about the culture shock of West Africa, man. What was that like?
Yeah, it was like being there as a 10-year-old was really something, but it was worth it in the long run. Like kids are pretty what's the word? Adaptable. So
Sure.
when I left there, or when I left Canada to go there, I was pretty sad. And then when I left Ghana to come back to Canada, I was pretty sad. So like you're always kind of just happy with what you're used to. So after spending 4 years there, it was just home. And it was a great place to grow up. I would say people are missing out, not getting that sort of it's a little like as a kid, it's a lot simpler. You're not as you don't grow up quite as fast as here.
That makes sense. And I mean, just going through those sorts of challenges as a kid is always going to kind of shape you and is definitely
That's
important
it.
in creating, who you are. Um, so you said you lived in Ghana. Is Ghana French speaking? Is that a French?
No, it's kind of in a pocket
Okay.
of like there's Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal very nearby, but it's Anglophone.
Weird. So I'm assuming you just didn't know any language when you went there. What was that kind of like being 10 and trying to make new friends without being able to speak the language?
Yeah, so luckily my parents they shelled out to put us in like the expat school with
Okay.
all the other foreign kids. Because yeah, there's no chance I'm going to a a local school there. That would have been rough. But they put us in a French school, a French speaking school, and I was not that good at French. I was in French immersion in Canada before coming going there, but I wasn't that good. So I just quit actually after my first day, and then I would never go back. And I got
Wow.
homeschooled for a year while I was in Ghana. And then my parents were like, "All right, you have to go to school next year."
That's insane. So when you came back to Canada, obviously, you know, you're what, 14, 13, 14 years old then?
14, yeah.
So was that your first year of like secondary school in high school then when you came
Yeah.
back?
First year I was taking the bus across Ottawa to go to high school. I was like, "Oh man, this is this is a big difference."
Right. Did you have any, problems making friends when you came back, or was it kind of like you were almost back home when you came back to Canada?
No, I was pretty salty about leaving Ghana, so I kind of had a chip on my shoulder. But like, you can't help but make friends if you're not a crazy person, you know? So
Yeah.
like in high school, it just kind of cultivates friendships. So you always will find the people that you would regularly gravitate towards.
Yeah.
So it was pretty easy.
And did you, find martial arts at this point, or when did you kind of start your martial arts journey then?
When I was 16. So it
Okay.
was 2 years after being in Ottawa. I was looking for a sport or something to do. And then I signed up for a Japanese jiu-jitsu gym, which is like a more of a self-defense system. And then I kind of got hooked. Actually, I wasn't hooked. I initially went for the week trial, and then I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I'm just gonna bail on this. This is not a big deal. And then they hit me with a callback, and it was fully effective. They're like, "Why haven't you been back in the gym?" And I didn't have a good reason, so I just, I'm like, I guess I'll come back. And then I was hooked.
For any of the gym owners out there, send the automated reply, man.
Yeah, man, callbacks work. It got me at 16.
That's awesome. So were you able to, grow friendships and meet a lot of people through martial arts then at 16?
Yeah, that was pretty much my life after that. Like I didn't do like I had friends in high school, but really the whole point of those years for me was just going to school so I could go to the gym. And I just like finish high school and then head to the gym and be there until, I had to go to bed.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long did you stick with that initial Japanese jiu-jitsu gym?
Long time. Those guys were pretty cool. Like Ottawa's a small city and it's a weird city, but there's a really good kind of background in American freestyle kickboxing.
Hmm.
There's a guy called Jean-Yves Thériault, who's like one of the greatest American freestyle kickboxers, and he is based out of Ottawa now. So my coaches were his students. So we kind of had an okay scene there. And it was only after the point where my coaches started to kind of outgrow their own gym. And one of them was getting more into stunt acting and things like that. And the other one was trying to become a police officer. That I was like, okay, I got to start looking somewhere else. And then I headed to TriStar.
Wow. How old do you remember how old you were when you found TriStar?
I mean, I knew about it because George was the man back then. And I had done a couple amateur MMA fights, and the matchmaker of that show knew Firas. So he was like, "Oh,
Wow.
I can get you in for a sparring day." Because TriStar has a thing where if you like sparring is open, anybody can go as long as you have an invite. So I was like, okay, this is a big deal. It was like an audition for me. So I remember I was at a friend's cottage. We were like partying, and then they were like, "Oh, you got to spar on Saturday." So I was like, "Okay." So we drove from the cottage to sparring, and I feel like I did good enough that they invited me back, and then I pretty much was there. They were just starting the dorms, so I started living at the dorms and making friends there, and then the rest is my whole life.
Wow. So did you have any overlap with George when you were training at TriStar? Was he still actively training there?
Yeah, so he did. I want to say he fought maybe 4 times, 5 times while I was there
Right.
pretty much full time. So I was probably there when he fought Dan Hardy, and then I don't know who he fought after that. He must have fought like Nick Diaz, Condit, and Big Rig.
Yeah. So you showed
Big
up
Big.
probably like 2012. Is that?
Yeah,
Yep.
that sounds about
Right.
right.
Right. Just kind of at the tail end of
Exactly.
yeah. Okay.
But it was cool. Like I was doing okay as a like 18, 19-year-old. And because I was similar in build to Dan Hardy, George invited me to go train with him in New York for that camp. So I
Wow.
was like, it was like such a big deal. It was like I was kind of starstruck. First of all, I've been watching this guy. Him and Crow, Dave Loiseau, were
Hmm.
guys that I was like totally idolized. So when he was like, "Oh, would you like to come train in New York at Henzo's?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." But I didn't know what that really meant. And then his travel agent called me, got my details, and I was on a flight like the next Monday or whatever, and we flew out there. And trained at Henzo's for a week, and that was cool.
That's
Then
unbelievable.
I was fully in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was some of the just like shocking things that you saw George do being a young professional, just ending your amateur career that really made you like realize you had to change things if you're going to be a pro MMA fighter?
Yeah, to me, I think there's a couple things. Like I always was of the opinion that if you're planning on going pro, you shouldn't expect to change things before like after turning pro. Like if you're
Right.
fighting as an
Yep.
amateur, you should be training like a pro anyway. So I always trained hard. I think the big thing with George is that he really understood how to plan out his training. Like his training sessions were long, but they were never just hitting a singular point in his game. He was always working on technique before everything, and then his sparring was concise and clean and hard, but it wasn't so dangerous. And then he would like do his lifting to keep his body in shape. Like he would hit his sprints, and he would do that consistently. Whereas most guys would just show up in the gym, spar, maybe do some pads, do the fun stuff, and then they'll bail. George is like fully committed to learning.
Right.
And that's something that like even now George amazes me. Like I'm a little bit spoiled, I guess, now because I've been training for a while. So like if I show up in the gym and it's like there's nobody for me to train with, not nobody for me to train with, but nobody for me to drill with, that's like a friend and we can chat during drills. I'm like, oh man, this sucks. George will roll in. He's the biggest fighter in the world, the best guy, and he'll train with some random blue belt he's never met, and I'll just be totally blown away. Like, how can George do that? He's the best.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
I mean, I think it definitely takes some level of being humble to be that great.
Hugely, hugely.
It's
It's
that,
not, but it's just that he doesn't even think like this guy's going to be brutal to talk to. He's just like, I'm going to get to train, so it's fun for him. Meanwhile, I'm thinking like, oh man, I gotta make small talk with this guy. I'm gonna hate this.
yeah.
That's what's going on in my head.
So, I mean, it really just seems like you and George, one similarity I see is just like the cerebral approach to fighting. Some people, they just want to go in, they want to have a dogfight. But it
Yeah.
seems like TriStar wants all of their fighters to be very calculated with their approach. How important was it for you to find a gym that kind of aligned with that instead of just going into one that wanted to create brawlers?
Yeah, that's like I always tell people that come to TriStar, we are a technique first gym,
Yes.
and I think that maybe we get some flack for that from critics, but we care. The amount of drilling we do is ridiculous. The amount of tightening up our jujitsu, our wrestling, our finishing, whatever, is more than I would say any other gym. And I think that for me helps me appreciate the sport more and helps me realize like one thing that Fraz teaches all of his students is that you need to come away from this. Like not everybody's going to become world champion and make millions of dollars. So you need to come away with this with some level of proficiency in teaching it. That way, you at least have this thing that you can take with you into the rest of your life. Because if you're planning on being a world champion and it doesn't happen for you, your knee explodes or whatever, you can at least have the fallback that you weren't wasting 10 years of your life just getting strong and fast. You're actually getting a master's degree, a PhD in the thing that you focused on. Like you are no longer an apprentice. You are an expert in this field, or at least you should be. So that's one thing that I've always appreciated is like we're not just smashing each other to bits every day. We're trying to get better in not only to impart this later on when I am retired and I decide to teach, but in the eventuality that it doesn't work out for me, I always have this knowledge. It's like nobody can take that from me. Even if I'm injured, I can still teach.
Yeah, it's definitely not like the 10 years are just completely frivolous. Like you're
Yeah, it's
you're
not like, oh,
learning
I
it.
guess
Yeah.
I guess I got to work at Boston Pizza now or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you can always teach jiu-jitsu if you believe that you're good enough and you got your black belt.
Do you see that as a career path for you? Do you want to, give back to the future generation of fighters?
Uh, I think so. I mean, it seems like the only way for a fighter to really retire gracefully is to be involved in some way. And I think that Canada has such a rough scene right now. Like we don't really, we haven't cultivated a culture of building up the next guys. Um, so I think being a part of that and helping to grow the scene out here would be something I'd be interested in.
Yeah.
But it's not like I'm looking at it like, oh, I gotta do that now, you know?
Yeah, that's understandable. And then what about your kids? Would you support them, moving into martial arts? Would you want them to fight, or would you rather them just kind of, do some jujitsu, learn some taekwondo, that sort of thing?
Yeah, like obviously, like any dad that does this as a job, they need to like as long as they get their black belts and they feel confident in a self-defense situation, I don't care. If they want to fight, I don't think they'll want to fight, honestly.
Yeah,
I don't see it being something that is even on their mind. But if they do and they're serious, then yeah, I think as a parent, the only thing you can do is help your kids be serious about whatever they choose. They could choose to be a blacksmith, but you need to try to be the best blacksmith possible because that's a real job that people appreciate and is useful. But if you just want to say you're going to be a woodworker and then faff around and like glue pieces of wood together and call it a job, then you're not allowed to do that. So like if they want to be a fighter, they got to train really. It's going to be way worse for them if they choose something else that I don't know about.
that's a great perspective. I mean, it's going to be a black belt in whatever you do, right?
Exactly.
So if you
That's the
pick
goal.
if you pick something that I don't know, you're screwed, man. Like I can't
Yeah,
help you if you do that.
and not just that, like if they choose martial arts, they're screwed because I know where they're cutting corners, you know. They're better off choosing something that I don't know because then like I can't be as harsh on them as I would be otherwise.
Yeah. So you said that you live in Toronto now, right?
Yeah.
What is that like when you do your training over in Tristar? Do you go and stay for a couple weeks for the entire camp? What's that like?
Yeah, so it's a 5 hour train ride or drive. So I will leave on Sunday nights after like right before dinner time here, and I'll get into Montreal late. I'll go to bed. I'll train Monday through to Friday sparring, and then I'll come home on the train. I'll hang out with the kids all weekend. I'll do one training session on the weekend, and then I'll do it again. And that'll go for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, like as long as the camp is. Luckily for me, my last few fights have been short, like short
Yeah,
notice, 3 weeks. So it hasn't been that brutal, but it's not that fun, you know, doing a 10-hour trek every week. But it is what it is. Some guys like it would be way worse, I think, if I had to leave for a month straight to go, train in
sure.
Thailand or whatever it is. So this is very manageable.
Yeah. It's kind of a happy medium there.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so what do you do to stay sharp when you're just outside of camp then? Do you have a little local gym that you get some work in, or what's that like?
Yeah. So Toronto's got a lot of good guys here. It's just that there isn't one kind of nexus where everybody trains. So there are a lot of good local gyms and a lot of good unknown local guys. And there are some great kickboxers. I mean, Simon Marcus has a gym out here. He's one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. He fought Poatan twice to a decision. He beat Stylebender, and he's just starting his MMA career now. He's 2-0. So he's a guy that is always fun to work with. And then Bazooka Joe, who was a Glory kickboxing champion, also has a gym out here. I haven't trained with him much these days, but like there are great gyms here in Toronto. So I'll just like go do some jiu-jitsu here, like kind of like I'm sure heard from a lot of fighters. Like they kind of do spot training until they go to their home gym. Some guys it's
Yeah.
Florida, some guys it's, Bangtown, Thailand, whatever.
Yeah. Um, what is that kind of like? Because it sounds like you're essentially your own head coach through most of the year. Do you do your own like strength and conditioning, your own nutrition? How do you kind of build just yourself as an athlete?
Yeah, so when I'm not in camp, I'll still go back to TriStar, once a month or once every 6 weeks or something. And Firas is very hands-on and he's always on the cutting edge of like what we should be doing. So I'll go there for a week and he'll give me a bunch of stuff to work on. So it's not like I'm wholly alone doing my own thing.
Yeah,
But otherwise, yeah, like it's pretty simple to stay in shape. You just don't get fat and run, do some sprints. It's simple. Everybody knows it.
yeah. It's just self-discipline at that point, right?
Exactly.
Um, so speaking of not getting fat, are there
Yeah.
any specific holiday foods in Canada that might be a little bit unique? Or maybe when you were, living over in Ghana, was there anything that was just unique to what typically is a holiday food?
Yeah, food. Well, my family on my mother's side is very British.
Okay.
So we're big on like what's something we'll have. We'll do a trifle, which is always nice. It's like custard, ladyfinger biscuits, cherries usually. Um, and that's something we always have during the holidays. Trying to think what else is a big hit. It's always pretty standard turkey, stuffing,
Yeah.
gravy, mashed potatoes. Oh, sausage meat is one thing we always have at our Christmas table. It's like pork and sage and a lot of butter. Outside of that, no, nothing, on the Ghanaian side, I think every West African would say jollof rice is like
Yeah.
the A1 pick, and it is. It really like it's one of those foods that sticks with you. I crave it and I have to make it. And I'll like go out to the West African grocery store and like I'll pick out all the ingredients to go make it. That's how good it is.
Yeah. Is there anywhere in Toronto that can give you some sort of African food?
I'm sure there is, but I'm like I'm so stuck in this location. This is like
Yeah.
pure Greek town, and you'd have to drive kind of far to get
Okay.
good West African food. But I'm sure there are plenty of great spots.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Just from what I've spent, in Vancouver and Calgary and Edmonton,
Mhm.
the immigrant populations are huge there. So
Huge. Yeah,
if you want good food, whatever ethnicity it is, it just takes some time to find it, a couple
exactly.
recommendations, and you'll find some mom that's sitting there that's just
Opened up a
making
little.
her super
Yeah,
authentic food. Yeah.
that's it.
Um, so I guess transitioning more to just your future fighting career, do you have anything on the docket? Is there anything lined up that you're looking forward to in 2025?
Nothing is solidified. I think the MMA kind of landscape right now, if you're unsigned to the UFC specifically, you're kind of in a rough spot. With Bellator selling to PFL and then kind of not putting on any shows,
Yeah.
it's tricky. Uh, like I got cut when they sold because I still had 3 fights on my contract, and I guess I was just too expensive for them to keep on or whatever. And initially I was like, man, I really got screwed here. But then I'm looking at guys who got kept on and they haven't fought or they only got to fight one time and now they're asking to be released. Um, so I would say for me, just trying to stay active locally if I can or internationally, but just break in back into the majors. But really there's only one kind of game in town. We'll see what happens with the GFL, but
Yeah.
to be optimistic about the GFL, I think is a little bit short-sighted
Yeah.
now. Like I'm not trying to be a skeptic. It would be great if there was some competition out there, but you know, things are a little slim these days. And unless the UFC decides to put on 40 more shows a year, you better do something exceptional to get in there. Especially as a guy, I'm 35, so it's not like I'm that like I really need to show that I'm special.
Right. You're not typically who Dana's looking for a contender series fighter.
Yeah, exactly. Like they kind of have their
Yeah.
specific picks, and there's a lot of like if you're on the right team, like I'm sure if one of my teammates was a world champion right now, things would be a lot easier for me. Uh, just because of the way things work in MMA. It's not like Artem Lovov got on tough twice because he was the best guy.
Yeah.
So it is what it is, and you just like as a fighter, you just need to understand that the more work you do, the more chances you have to get noticed by somebody who's willing to pay you what you're worth. So you just keep doing what you can. Don't like hold. My plan is to not hold out. And like you see a lot of guys that are like, oh, UFC might be coming to, Vancouver might be coming to Canada in the next 6 months. I shouldn't fight because I might get injured or I might lose, and then I'm not as, you know, marketable or whatever. But just fight, do it as many times as you can. If you believe in your skills, you'll win and it'll be okay.
Well, especially in the age of social media too. You get a couple
Yeah.
like you had your step in knee knockout. You get a couple
Yeah.
of those knockouts that go viral And you know what? You are the late notice replacement when somebody does
That's
fall
it.
out of a UFC card. Sean Shelby does call you and be like, hey, can you come in on 14 days? Can you make weight?
Exactly. So you just got to be ready for those opportunities, but don't hold out hope. Like
Yeah.
you kind of have to walk a tightrope.
So I did want to ask specifically about your Bellator career and the end of that, because, like you said, we see people like Pitbull out here demanding to be released when he's
Yeah,
any organization on the planet would love to have him. He is a world champion caliber fighter, and yet he's sitting on the
exactly.
sideline. Um, but you did actually say that you were cut in that process. Um,
Yeah.
was that kind of out of the blue? Did you know that Bellator was looking to sell? How was that being employed by a company that was kind of going under?
No, so like we kind of heard rumors that they were going to sell, but we didn't know what that was going to mean. And then I had re-signed right before that fight, the Adam Piccolotti fight.
Yep.
And so I lost the fight. I fought not the way that I should have fought. I didn't feel very good in there. But he won and he's a good fighter. So I was like, oh man, okay, whatever. I got three more fights. I've never lost two fights in a row. Like I've never gone to a decision. I should be good, like sometimes maybe if you're on your last fight on your contract, maybe they'll cut you then. But I was like, oh yeah, I should fight again in 3 months. Like my main takeaway was like I just need activity. Like I just didn't feel all that comfortable in the cage. And then I got a call on must have been like Tuesday. It was a bad time to call. Me and my wife were like having a date day because I had been away for 6 weeks or whatever training. And then I get a call from my manager and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're fired." I was like, "Oh no." So I didn't say anything the rest of the date anyways, but it was fine because like it allowed me then to book a fight 3 weeks later and then continue to try to book fights frequently and more short notice. That's the one thing about being signed to Bellator was great. And obviously, you take what you can get as a fighter. But if the show only puts on 10, 12 shows a year and the roster is big, it doesn't matter how much you want to fight. You're just not getting the call because
Yeah.
they need to put more guys on. And you're definitely like, unless you're their favorite fighter, no chance you're getting three fights in a year. They have 12 shows. How they can't fight that many guys. So,
Yeah. At
um,
that point, it's numbers.
yeah, exactly. Like they just so it was interesting because I didn't really feel bad. Like I'm in a place now where I know how good I am, and I like the people I care about know how good I am. So getting cut wasn't this huge blow of like, oh, people are gonna think I suck. Like, Fraz knows I'm good. All my teammates know I'm good. My wife knows I'm good. It was more so just like, oh man, I gotta like get back to the big leagues.
Yeah.
That's all.
The amount of shows is really stands out because,
Yeah,
I think you're really good too. I also
yeah,
think that you haven't been active enough. And I don't think
that's
that
it.
that's your, I mean, I'm sure you've pulled out of some fights. I'm sure some other fighters have pulled out of fights, but
Exactly.
at the end of the day, like you need the opportunities. If you don't have the
Yeah,
opportunity, you can't have 25 fights.
that's it. And like, yeah, the guys that are like really get to show their skills are guys that are active. Nobody sits 6 months, fights, and looks great. Like, I don't care who you are, you're gonna feel it, especially if you don't have 40 fights. You know what I mean? Like when guys are on their like on a tear, they're always fighting within like look, who's the guy, the black guy, Buckley.
Yeah.
He's having a crazy year, but he's fought a million times, and he's looking better every time. Who's a guy that Gary,
Ian Gary.
he,
Yeah.
look at the beginning of his career. I thought he looked rough in his debut, and now he looks like a legitimate top five contender. And that's just consistency over time. Like if he had fought twice since his debut, he would have been a similar fighter. It's comfort that gets you to the top. And all the guys that people talk about are guys who are active. Nobody sits and looks good. You know what I mean? Look at Hamzat. Even Hamzat, who's an amazing fighter, when he sat for so long and then he fought Gilbert Burns, that was his roughest fight because he had been out for so long. Uh, and now you look at him, he's fighting consistently. He looks like a superhero again. Like being in there every 3 to 4 months is the way to go.
What do you think that difference is? Is it just comfortability, or is there some growth that happens when you fight a lot? Like, where is the change there?
Yeah, it's definitely the comfortability of like, you're not going to get tired because you were just here. The moment's not that big because you were just here. You know, it like that no matter what happens, you'll do it again in 3 months. Whereas if you don't fight for 12 months, all of a sudden now all that pressure, not only just from you, where it's like, oh man, I haven't done this in a while. It's also the people who run the business. They're like, this guy hasn't fought in 12 months. So let's see how he does. And then if you lose, it's like, well, he's not going to do it again for 12 months. So who cares? You see guys that get stuck in this, the motion of their career is so halted that kind of nobody cares. Like, look at a guy, I don't know what's happened to him. He's another really great guy, Gregor Gillespie.
Yeah.
Uh, he was winning a bunch of fights and then he started to halt. And all of a sudden, now he hasn't fought. Maybe he's retired, who knows? But like, if it not only makes you worse at fighting, it makes it less appealing for you to take that risk because it's like, if I fight now, like I got to fight again. They're only going to give me another shot in 6 months, and then I can't really build anything from there. Nobody became a world champion fighting every 8 months.
Hmm.
So I think it only benefits you to keep fighting consistently.
With the fans too, you see
Yeah,
Joaquin Buckley's perfect example. Kevin Holland, another example. When you fight 4 or 5 times a year, then all of a sudden you just had a couple million people watch you 5 times in a year, and they
you're
start
top of
following.
mind for guys.
Yep.
Guys are like, oh yeah, I'll become a fan of this guy because he's around me.
Yeah.
It's the same reason people go see the Rock's movies. Like he can't be everybody's favorite actor, but he's there enough for people to be like, all right,
Right.
I'll go watch this guy's movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird kind of intricacy of fighting that, a lot of people don't think of is, the UFC is the best. They put on 42 events a year, but nobody,
Yeah,
that's still not enough fights for everybody on their
for
roster.
every guy. There are guys
So,
who want to fight more for sure
yeah.
in the UFC, and you have to prove to them that you're one of those guys. And then they'll, like Protez, they'll be like, okay, we'll give you opportunities. But if you're just some guy that they don't care about, that's constantly calling them, they'll be like, all right,
Yeah.
you'll fight when we tell you to fight.
Yep. What's your opinion on the PFL's regular season and postseason? Do you like that aspect of, at least being guaranteed a couple fights?
I think it's not great. I think from the friends that I have that have been in the show, like that's rough. Look, fighting, like I said, fighting consistently is fun, but taking 6 months off and then fighting 5 times in 6 months is not, that's not the way to do it. Like every single guy, oh, I know Olivier, right? He won this
Yeah.
tournament twice. Great fighter. Like they're they're so miserable by the end of the run. Like they're trying to pack in 1 week where they can enjoy their lives between camps, and then they're going in and fighting, and they're just like, This is awful," like, and then they have this long break where they don't get to do anything. I don't know, and I think from a fan's point of view too, it's like not that fun to watch. I'd rather follow these guys more consistently over the whole year because it's not like there's any off season for the like what I from what I understand with regular sports, the off season a lot of trades are happening and people are still relevant. There's like exhibition games that are being played. PFL, there's nothing. So like people just completely forget about it until the next season.
Yep.
It really doesn't make any sense. I like the way that Bellator was doing their tournament.
The Grand
I
Prix.
think Yeah, I think
Okay. Yep.
if you're gonna do something like that, it's you either have to do it in one night or you do it over the course of a year or a year and a half even, and you just show people's road to the belt. I don't like half a year being on and then having an off season. I don't think it is good for fighter growth, and I don't think it makes the best fights either.
I agree. I also think just them grading a first round knockout or a first round finish being
Yeah, the
better,
points is a whole
like,
other thing. Is
it's
crazy.
super bizarre. Like, I guess kind of what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it to where you can't argue one way or the other, but it's not effective.
No, it doesn't really make sense. It seems like it was something that was discussed in a boardroom that wasn't like they didn't really think about it like realistically.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree. What were the first fights that you remember watching?
I remember the first fight I ever watched. I was visiting family, my dad's, I think it was my dad's aunt and uncle in Atlanta. Um, and I turned on the TV and Vernon Tiger White, Chuck Liddell was on. And that was the first fight I ever watched in my life. Uh, I was like, oh man, this is crazy. This is rough. Um, and then things that stick out in my head, I think Crow's knockout of what was the guy's name? John McCarthy or whatever, Chainsaw, the spinning back kick into flying knee when Loiseau knocked him out.
Yes.
That's a big that sticks out to me. I always think about George George Matt Hughes too, where he did inside low kick and then obviously kicked him in the balls twice, but whatever. And then he threw a left side high kick. That's like a sick finish to me. That was like a really cool fight. And then George Matsera too, I think is another one I think about a lot.
Just
Just
getting
like
those losses back. Yeah.
you've never seen a ground and pound finish where it was just like knees to the back in turtle. So I think that that's a cool finish. But basically, it's just the guys that I idolized as a kid. I'm
Right.
trying to think. Oh, um, BJ Penn, Kowluno, I want to say. The one where he just
Yep.
uppercutted him a bunch and
Yep.
they licked the blood off his gloves. I thought that was a really cool that was sick. That BJ Penn's my favorite fighter, so
BJ Penn was the GOAT, dude. I've never
yeah,
like just his story too of being the first American to learn his get his
gangster.
black belt in 3 years, go and just tear up
Yeah.
jujitsu scenes, and then yeah,
And like really good boxer too. Very
fighting way
underrated
bigger than he
boxer.
is.
Exactly. I think unfortunately new fans have no idea what BJ Penn was when he was the man. When he went and got with Marv Marinovich and started training properly, and it was just the best lightweight in the world easily. Just so sick. And then he fired the guy because it was just too hard.
Yeah, it's always weird when you have fighters like that that obviously have a terrible losing streak at the end of their career,
Mhm.
and somehow that taints how good that they were in their prime.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's the fan base. Partially it's uh the way you don't really control the narrative around your career, right? Like all they can show, they don't owe you any sort of fanfare, right? I'm saying the UFC or whoever promotes
Yeah,
your fights. They're just going to show your highlights, or if you get knocked out, they're going to show the other guy's highlights, and they're not really going to butter you up in any way. They don't owe you nothing. So I think that unfortunately for BJ Penn, he just fell victim to that, where it's not like he has access to that level of reach where he can show people, look, I was the man, you know? And also, it's kind of inevitable for at least 80% of fighters to have a bad tail end of their career. Like,
yeah.
you're just so crazy about it.
I mean, it's really tough to argue that anybody should stop when they're winning. Like you see the opposite side of that. Khabib retires undefeated. Everybody clowns on him for being a coward, for not
Exactly.
fighting later, and that sort of thing. Where it's like, you can never win as a fighter that has fans, right? The fans are always
No,
going to
like,
complain.
and even like, I mean, not to say this is going to happen, but there are guys who come off of a three fight skid and then they turn the corner and they're the man. You know, Jorge Masvidal is a guy. I remember he fought Wonder Boy in New York,
Yep.
and I he was pretty down. I was there and I rode the shuttle back to the airport with him and his family. And I was just like kind of not eavesdropping, but I couldn't help but hear like he's like, oh, I got to think about some stuff. I got to figure things out. And then he comes back, he knocks out Darren Till, and then what happened? Oh, he did the jump knee against Askren.
Askren and then Nate Diaz all
Yeah,
in
and
one year. Yeah.
all of a sudden he's the best fighter of all time. Meanwhile, everybody was ready to write him off and say, "Oh, maybe he should retire. Maybe he should hang it up." So like, it's hard to tell a guy to retire at the same time. It's like don't quit while you're like like I don't know. It's hard to play it. You can never win because yeah, you could be Khabib and people would be like, oh, he should have kept fighting. Or you could be Jorge and imagine he had retired after Wonder Boy. And then you never get all the great stuff he did.
I mean, I never want to talk about any fighter's financials, but I can almost guarantee that Masvidal made more money in his last few fights in the UFC than in his entire career before that. So,
Definitely like and the only reason is because he kept believing in himself, So it's hard to nobody can really tell a guy when to stop unless it's their like family, their close
right.
family.
Yeah, I mean, right back to Khabib too. I mean, it was
Yeah,
unfortunately
exactly.
his father passed and his mom told him to be done. So, you know,
There's not much you can do if you make a promise like that. Good
yep,
on him for doing it.
yep. Um, yeah. Do you have any of I think I remember seeing somewhere you said that you don't watch your own highlights. Do you have a favorite fight of your own?
Uh no. I think, I've been thinking a lot about the TKO loss I had. I think that was like a good fight because I was not, again, just wasn't feeling my best, but like it was pretty cool getting I like if that fight would have played out properly, I think like that's a sick fight. Three knockdowns and then I don't know. I think that's a cool fight. But no, my favorite fights. Uh maybe the fight directly after getting cut maybe is a good one just because meant a lot to like as much as I believe in myself, like it's a little bit of validation to make it easy like that. To be and 3 weeks later to be like, yeah, like you can mess up in the cage, it happens, but no, like nobody can like if you've made it to that level and you're at that level, you can't really get beat by guys that aren't at that level, which is nice.
Right. Everybody says that there's a lucky punch or a puncher's
There is, which
chance,
there is, yeah.
but I get what you're saying that at some point it's so improbable for that to happen that there's some
If you
sort
fight
of
if you fight properly and you're comfortable in there, yeah, like it's very, very slim. That's why I remember Gegard. He fought Uriah Hall
Mhm.
and he got spin back kicked KO'd. And then he was pissed off. He's like, everybody's telling me I'm boring. I'm trying to be exciting. And then I get KO'd. And then he got the rematch. And it was so easy for him because he just fought the way he wanted to fight. So it is kind of like that.
Do you think about cognitively think about that at all, like to be exciting versus just winning the fight to try to make the highlight, or is that just completely out the wayside?
No, it's funny. I'm lucky because I am exciting naturally because I'm the opposite. I'm always thinking it's going 3 rounds. If you get a position, keep the position. Don't hunt subs. But luckily for me, the way I fight when I'm in the cage is like, I get a lot of finishes. Exciting stuff happens. But no, I'm always of the opinion that like let it play out. We're going 15.
Yeah, I mean it's the way to keep your cardio too, right, and not gas.
Exactly. If you see guys, they hunt to finish, and next thing you know, they're you know getting TKO'd just by fatigue.
Yep. Is there a like a finish that you really want to create to happen, be it a some weird submission or some highlight spinning knockout, or is there anything like that that you think of?
No, not really. There's like one knee that I thought I was the one of the few guys that was doing it, and then I saw a guy in the UFC actually pull it out. It's not a jump switch knee. It's like if your lead knee, you're kind of jumping sideways, and then your lead knee comes up. So it's like a switch knee, but you're throwing the lead. But a guy did it in the UFC. It was pretty cool. A Brazilian guy.
Huh.
That was one that I had thought about.
And then what is your favorite submission to just pull off in a gym?
I mean, my best one is definitely Anaconda or Dars.
Long
Um,
arms.
yeah, but very underrated submission that more people should do if you have good back attack is the Scottish Twister. Stevie Ray? He fought
Yep.
in PFL
Yep.
and the UFC. He scored two. He scored one on Pettis, and I think
Okay.
he scored one on some other guy recently. It's a good sub. And I scored a lot.
Did he on Pettis? He hit it from like a body triangle, didn't he?
Yeah, so he has like a half body triangle with his leg in the middle. And then when the guy spins on top, he hits it. It's very strong.
Yeah, I remember watching that fight against Pettis, thinking that Pettis was about to roll and be on top, and then he's tapping,
Yeah.
and I was so confused by that. I didn't even know that that was a Scottish twister.
Yeah, and I'll hit that on good guys and they'll be like, what even is that? So yeah,
Huh.
it's his move. As far as I know, that's his move. He made it up. I've never seen anybody else do it.
Huh. Yeah, that's wild. Um, and then outside of obviously George, who are some of your favorite guys to train with in TriStar?
Aiemann Zahabi, Louis
Yeah,
Sanudakis,
yeah.
two bantamweights, they're killers. Aiemann obviously he's maybe top 10 now. Should be fighting in the top
He's in
five.
the
He's the
rankings.
man.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah. Louis, he's fought it all over, and he's really like when we talk about technique being our focus at TriStar, Louis is one of the most technical guys. Arnold Allen is always a good training partner. He's it's like I know he's rated, but he's underrated, especially in terms of his work ethic, you know? And then who's another guy? Rory was always a fun guy to train with. As far as young guys, there's a young guy called Steve Bissinger that I think is a really good fighter. He's only 1-0 now, but he's good. Um, Alexander Martinez, he's a PFL guy from
Okay.
Canada. He's really cool, nice guy, smart, trains hard. There's too many guys to name. If you're a TriStar, don't get mad.
Yeah, no, Arnold Allen definitely sticks out, man. He's my pick as the dark horse in 145 right now.
I mean, the way that the division is shaking out, I don't know, like you got Diego Lopez, who looks good, interesting fight for Ilya. And then who else? Like Gene Silva, I guess I think I would rate as like
John Silva. There's
a tr-
Mobzar, Evloyev.
yeah, I don't like to me as far as matchups for Topuria, I don't think that's a good one. Like I don't think he's a challenge
No.
to Topuria. I think like a good boxer is gonna threaten Topuria, and Movsar is obviously not that guy. I think he's a great fighter, but just in terms of the way he matches up against him, not good. I think John Silva, Arnold, and Diego Lopez are the three guys. So like any one of those three guys could win the belt.
Yeah, I completely agree with that take. That's
Yeah.
yeah, spot on. Um, well, we're kind of wrapping up at the end here, so I did just want to give you an opportunity to plug whatever you wanted to plug. I'll have all of your links and everything down in the description, of course, but just let the people know where they can find you.
I'm on Instagram at ratgarbage. I am not really on Twitter. Go to ratgarbage.ca if you want to buy clothes. I make clothes. Um, what else? Just come to the gym. Come to TriStar. I'll be
Hell yeah.
there.
Yeah, and I guess we'll talk about your rat garbage real quick. It's your nickname, but it's also your clothing brand. What's
Yeah.
just the quick origin of rat garbage?
Yeah, it's become a little bit more than it should be, honestly, but initially it was just because when social media was really becoming a thing in MMA specifically, I kept getting told you got to make an Instagram for self-promotion, all this stuff. Like the amount of times when Connor was the man that people would tell fighters like me, you gotta look what Connor's doing. You gotta be like Connor. You gotta do call outs. You gotta talk shit. You gotta be on it. So as kind of a rebellion against that way of thinking, I started an Instagram that's as un-Conor McGregor like as possible, where his stuff was very much self-aggrandizing and he's looking good. He's all oiled up with it, hitting the bag or something. And I like Conor. No, I'm not trash talking. I'm more talking about all the guys that jumped on the train of like,
Yep.
here's an inspiring song and I'm hitting the bag. The hard work never stops. Like how many guys do we need doing that? So I started it just by being as grungy and gross as possible to try to, I don't know,
Be
more of a
contrarian.
just yeah, pretty much just a joke for myself. It's funny, when George found out that this was my Instagram, he called me and he's like, Mandel, you have to stop. This is not good. He's like, "No, shut it down. This is horrible." Like, yeah, whatever.
Man, I think you actually have some pretty cool merch. I think it ended
I
up being
appreciate it, buddy.
like it's a weird concept. I didn't think I'd like a picture of a dead rat on a t-shirt, but it actually like
Yeah.
aesthetically works.
Thank you. That's the whole point. It has to look good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on to the show, Mandel. I wish you the best of luck and hopefully we can get you in the UFC, man.
I appreciate that. Yeah, make it happen, buddy. Do whatever you can.
I'll pull the strings. I don't have many,
Use
but
your
I'll
pull.
try my best.
Cool. Good talking to you.
Awesome.